Hi, it's Mitch from PickDawgz.com, and it is Wednesday, June the 12th, 2024, here with your NBA first half and Major League Baseball first 5-inning picks for today. We've got NBA Finals Game 3 and 15 Major League Baseball games on today's card. Of course, and we'll cover the first half and first 5 innings of all of them. Of course, we also cover today in sports history. Today, in 1991, Chicago Bulls win their first NBA title. Michael Jordan, the MVP, and of course, the dynasty was born. And, the Bulls got it done a number of different ways over the years, but it was always Michael leading the way. But, of course, it'll be us leading the way today as we continue to crush the books, taking names and kicking some butt. Let's beat up on the books some more today. Let's get right into it. We go to Dallas, where the Mavericks take on the Boston Celtics. Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Celtics leading the series 2-0. It is now or never for the Mavericks. This is about as must-win of a game as there is for the Mavericks. Of course, they came out pretty strong in Game 2. Could not get it done, though. A giant performance by Luka, who was really downgraded as far as his health status before the game started. Of course, the Celtics' problems with Porzingis' health, nothing new there. The guy has been injured for the bulk of his career. Jason Tatum having another horrible NBA Finals, but a lot of people argue with me saying, well, he doesn't have to because he's got a great team. He does have a great team. It doesn't make Tatum's performance any better. I think, generally the Celtics have been the better first half team of these two all season long and in these finals, but I'll tell you what, with the Mavericks back to the wall, I expect them to come out gangbusters. I'm going to take the Mavericks first half as my pick for this one. For our first game of the Major League Baseball card, we head to Minnesota, where the Twins are taking on the Rockies. Pablo Lopez on the mound for the Twins. It's Austin Gomber on the mound for the Rockies. Lopez has really not delivered this season, having that ERA north of 5. Meanwhile, Gomber having a career year, but coming off really not a great performance last time out. We look at the way that these teams are hitting the baseball, especially versus, righties for the Rockies because they're facing a righty here, and lefties for the Twins. Twins actually hitting 10 percentage points higher. We look at the last 10 games, though, the Twins just hitting righties at 145, while the Rockies hitting lefties at just 219. So neither of these teams really hitting the ball all that well. I think, Lopez to me has always been a guy that you have to pay a high price for, and he just never really seems to deliver. He certainly has all the tools, but we just don't see it often enough. Like we did yesterday, all the value on the Rockies, and we're going to take them here for the first 5. For our next game, we head to Milwaukee, where the Brewers are hosting the Toronto Blue Jays. Blue Jays blanked the Brewers on Tuesday, and the Brewers, well, they certainly had chances, not a ton of them, but they certainly had chances, just were unable to take advantage of them. When we look at this particular game, Tobias Myers on the mound for the Brewers. It's Chris Bassett on the mound for the Blue Jays. Bassett's been pretty solid with a 1.40 ERA over his last 5 starts. Myers at 2.20, but the bulk of that 5 runs allowed against the White Sox and 4 allowed against the Cubs. But outside of that, no runs allowed in 8 innings of work last time out against the Detroit Tigers. Which Myers are we going to get? When we look at the way that these teams are hitting the baseball, the Brewers clearly hitting better versus righties, 262 to 231 for the season and 283 to 228 over their last 10 games. The Brewers don't get shut out all that often, especially at home, and hitting 274 versus righties over the last 5 games. I think they break out the bats today. I'll take the Brewers in the first 5 of this game. For our next game, we head to San Francisco, where the Giants are taking on the Astros. Logan Webb on the bump for the Giants, and it's Framber Valdez on the mound for the Astros. Both these teams still trying to get back to 500, and if the Giants can get the win here, they get there. Logan Webb has been at the top of their rotation for quite some time. Framber Valdez, back-to-back really solid starts, allowing just a run in each of those, going 7 innings and then going 9 innings against the LA Angels. Logan Webb has gone 7 innings in each of his last 3 starts, but he allowed 4 runs against the Yankees, but we can't hold that against him because a lot of people give up 4 runs against the Yankees. kind of a little bit of an outlier stat there. We look at the way these teams are hitting the baseball. The Astros, one of the best hitting teams overall in baseball, but the Giants quietly only 5 percentage points behind them when it comes to hitting left-handed pitching at 252 versus 257 versus righties for the Astros. The Astros also, when you look at the last 10 games, the Giants hitting 287 versus righties. I'm going to take the Giants in the first 5 of this game. For our next game, we head to San Diego where the Padres are taking on the Oakland A's. Michael King on the bump for the Padres. It's Hogan Harris on the mound for the A's. King has been good this season, but I think for me, he walks so many batters, and that is certainly going to be a problem at some point, but he's been able to escape, including last time out when he pitched pretty well, allowing 0 runs against the Arizona Diamondbacks, only walking 1 batter. His walk numbers certainly have come down, but the ERA over his last 5 still at 2.20, but a lot of that is a game that happened 5 games ago. We look at Hogan Harris for the A's, making his 3rd start of the season. He's only allowed 1 run so far, but we know the Padres are the best hitting team when it comes to batting average in baseball. They're hitting lefties at 226 for the season versus 218 versus righties for the A's, but the thing is that the Padres 242 versus lefties over their last 10, while the A's just 178 versus right-handed pitching. A little too much for me. I don't like the price, but I'll take the Padres anyway. For our next game, we head to Baltimore, Camden Yards, where the Orioles are taking on the Braves. It's Cade Povich on the mound for the O's, while Spencer Schwellenbach gets his 3rd start for the Braves. Of course, Povich making his 2nd start after allowing 6 runs in that game against the Toronto Blue Jays in a game that the Orioles lost 6-5. To me, I thought he pitched pretty well. Of course, he made the big mistake, and that was the home run he gave up to Vlad Guerrero Jr. I think as a rookie pitcher, you're going to make mistakes like that, and if you're going to get taken out of the park, who better to do it than Vlad Jr. Meanwhile, we've seen Schwellenbach now a couple times, and he's really been hit a few times pretty decently. The thing about him is that, he wasn't really the top guy in the Braves farm system to be brought up. In fact, he jumped a couple guys when they brought him in, thinking that maybe he was a savior there for the Spencer Strider hole. But you know what? I think that, in this particular game, the Orioles, just the hotter team. And to be honest, I think Povich is the better pitcher of these two. We're getting a pretty good value here on the O's, and that's going to be my pick. For our next game, we head to Detroit, where the Tigers are taking on the Nationals. What a game it was on Tuesday. And today, Reese Olson getting the ball here for the Tigers. It's Jake Irvin on the mound for the Nationals. Both these guys have certainly had their highs and lows this season. Jake Irvin, a 1.60 ERA over his last 5 starts, coming off of a 6-inning shutout performance against the Braves. He's shut out the Braves twice in his last 3 starts. In both of those games, going 6 innings. The other game, he allowed 2 runs against the Cleveland Guardians. But for Reese Olson, this is a guy who had really solid numbers this season, except in the win-loss column, but he's been absolutely bombed in his last 2 starts, allowing 8 runs against the Brewers in 4 innings and 5 runs against the Red Sox in 5 1/3 innings. It hasn't been a pretty story for Olson recently, and sort of that win-loss record maybe starting to make a little bit more sense. When we look at the hitting over the last 10 games for these two teams versus right-handed pitching, it's the Nationals at 228 with the Tigers at just 193. I like the Nationals again in this one for the first 5 innings. For our next game, we head to Tampa Bay, where the Rays are taking on the Cubs. It's Aaron Savali on the mound for the Rays and Javier Assad on the mound for the Cubs. The Cubs have been pretty miserable lately, 14-21 on the road, and the Rays bouncing out of that really tough stretch against the Baltimore Orioles, getting a heroic win on Tuesday night, knocking a home run to cover the run line, and for those of us who may have had some interest in that as well. Savali on the mound here for the Rays hasn't certainly been, the guy that they hoped that he would be, but there's still time for him. While Assad has really good numbers, just hasn't paid a lot of dividends. In last game out, Assad allowing 5 runs against the Cincinnati Reds didn't really get it done. He had allowed 4 runs 2 games prior to the St. Louis Cardinals. Meanwhile, Savali allowing 4 runs against the Orioles. I think that the Rays have seen enough of the Baltimore Orioles, and I think anybody else on the other side of the field just seems like easier work for them. We look at the way the Rays are hitting recently. Well, it hasn't been all that great because they've been facing the Orioles, who have really had their number. But I do think that they're the better team in this game, and I'll take the Rays in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Boston, where the Red Sox are taking on the Phillies. Nick Pivetta on the mound for the Red Sox, and it's Christopher Sanchez on the mound for the Phils. Sanchez having a remarkable start to the season, 1.40 ERA over his last 5 starts. He's only allowed 2 runs over his last 3 starts, pitching extremely well over that span. He's been going, past 5 innings in each of his starts. Meanwhile, Nick Pivetta put it together last time out against the Braves, allowing just 1 hit and no runs over 7 innings of work. But prior to that, we've seen him get hit, and we saw him get hit by the Tigers. We saw him get hit by the Milwaukee Brewers. The thing is, the Red Sox have not been a very good home team this season, and the Phillies, while they haven't been nearly as good on the road, they still have been the better team of these two. Overall, when you see the Phillies versus righties at 246 for the season, the Red Sox versus lefties at 244, and even over the recent games, it still is very, very tight with the way these teams are hitting the other side. The thing is, I know Pivetta spent a lot of time in Philadelphia, but at the same time, wasn't all that good. I'm gonna take the Phillies in this one, and that's gonna be my pick for the first 5. For our next game, we head to New York, where the Mets are taking on the Marlins. David Peterson on the mound for the Mets. It's Braxton Garrett on the mound for the Marlins. The Mets had been crushing left-handed pitching heading into Tuesday's game, but it wasn't the case as Jesus Luzardo worked a masterpiece against them once again. Meanwhile, Braxton Garrett, he's been up and down for the Marlins this season as far as his pitching performances. Last time out, allowing 5 runs against the Tampa Bay Rays, but prior to that, allowing just 1 run against the Padres, and then prior to that, shutting out the Arizona Diamondbacks on a complete game. Meanwhile, when we look at Peterson, as he continues to make his way back into the majors, he's allowed 2 runs in each of his last 2 starts. His only 2 starts that he's made of the season, but last time he was stretched out a little bit further. The thing is that when we look at the way the teams are hitting, the Mets hitting left-handed pitching at 257 versus 219 versus lefties for the Marlins for the season, and 351 for the Mets over their last 10 games to 188 for the Marlins. But one thing we know about the Mets, the more it looks like that they should be a sure thing, the more they aren't. I'm going to take the Marlins first 5. That's going to be my pick for this game. For our next game, we head to Cincinnati, where the Reds are taking on the Guardians for the Battle of Ohio. Nick Lodolo on the mound for the Reds, and it's Tanner Bibby on the mound for the Guardians. The Guardians getting the win in Game 1, 5-3. The Reds had some chances late, were unable to convert. Bibby's been okay, allowing 2 runs in his last start against the Royals, 1-1 prior to that against Nationals, and then 3 prior to that playing against the LA Angels. He's got a 1.40 ERA over his last 5 starts. Lodolo, has been strong in his last 3. He had a little bit of a rough patch there, but in his last 3 games, 2 against the Cubs and 1 against the Cardinals, he has pitched very, very well, allowing 1 run in 2 of those and 2 runs in the other. We look at the way these teams are hitting, especially recently. The Guardians hitting left-handed pitching at 247, while the Reds just 219 versus right-handed pitching. Over the last 10 games, though, it's the Reds at 271 versus righties to just 212 for the Guardians. I think the Reds even this one up. I'm going to take the Reds for the first 5 of this game. For our next game, we head to St. Louis, where the Cardinals are taking on the Pirates. Sonny Gray on the bump for the Cards against Bailey Falter for the Pirates. Sonny Gray has pitched well Sonny Gray-like this season, but at certain times, he's been a little un-Sonny Gray-like, allowing a little bit more runs than we're used to seeing from him. Meanwhile, Falter coming off a horrible performance against the Dodgers, where he allowed 5 runs to bring his ERA over his last 5 to 2.00. Gray, though, is at 2.60 over his last 5, allowing 3 runs against the Rockies and 4 against the Phillies and 5 against the Angels. Of course, that was a few starts ago at this point. But, the thing is what we saw on Tuesday, the Cardinals had a lot of chances in that game, were unable to capitalize, and, the Pirates certainly blundered their way around it as well. But this Cardinals team just looks absolutely lost. They're hitting just 210 versus lefties for the season, and 213 versus lefties over their last 10 games. The Pirates hitting 236 versus righties. All the value on the Pirates here. We're going Pirates first 5. For our next game, we head to Kansas City, where the Royals are hosting the Yankees. Altavilla getting the start here for the Royals. That means bullpen game up against Cody Petit for the Yankees. Petit, we've seen him at times look pretty decent so far this season. Last time out, he lasted though just 4 2/3 against the Dodgers. Allowed just 2 hits and struck out a batter, but that was all he lasted in that game. But certainly kept the Yankees in it. He had allowed 2 runs prior to that against the San Francisco Giants and just a run against the Cleveland Guardians. So far, so good for Petit. As for the Royals, I think going to the bullpen is just a bad idea, as their bullpen is absolutely hideous this season. I think the bats have done the talking for the Royals late into games to somewhat masquerade and disguise it, but at the same time, we know those problems are there. When we look at the way the Yankees are hitting the baseball, 251 to 249 for the Royals. These are just the two of the better hitting teams in baseball, and the Royals 257 in their last 10 games, while the Yankees at 250. But I see Yankees bats against Royals relievers, and I see a lot of runs. I'm going to take the Yankees first 5 in this one. For our next game, we head to Seattle, where the Mariners are taking on the White Sox. Bryce Miller on the bump for the Mariners, and Jonathan Cannon getting the ball here for the White Sox. We've seen the White Sox have a few pitchers that look like Cannon, at least out on the mound recently. Of course, Nick Nastrini being one of them, whose numbers were absolutely terrible, and then he comes out and pitches a gem. Maybe that's what the White Sox are expecting from Cannon, as actually their play for the first 5 innings or first half of the games has been pretty strong all season long. It's been the back half of the game in the bullpens that's been the problem for the White Sox. On the other side of it, Bryce Miller was undressed last time out by the Kansas City Royals, allowing 7 runs on 6 hits in just 5 innings of work. He was coming off of a 6-inning shutout performance against the Angels. Miller has been hit and miss, and I just think getting this kind of value with the White Sox in the first 5s are just kind of tough to pass up, because the thing is, I think most are looking at them, like they are terrible for the complete game, when it's really just the last few innings where they struggle. Neither of these teams can hit the baseball. I'll take a shot with the White Sox in the first 5. For our next game, we head to Arizona, where Slade Cecchione gets the ball for the D-backs up against Jose Soriano for the Angels. And the Angels have not been very good this season. They're one of the worst teams out there, but Soriano actually isn't horrible. He has been hit a few times recently, and it just seems that for me, he's a feast or famine type of guy. Either he gives up 1 run or no runs, or he gives up 4 runs. So basically that's what you're banking on. But when you look at the other side of it, the Diamondbacks and Cecchione, he's been no prize whatsoever, allowing 3 runs last time out, just a run the time before that. But he's a lot like Soriano in that he's feast or famine, but his runs allowed is 6, not 4, so significantly higher. I think what we're going to see in this one is a lot like what we saw on Tuesday's game. A lot of offense and not a lot of defense. Neither of these teams' batting averages jump off the page at you, but I'll tell you what does jump off the page is just how bad the starting pitching is in this game. I'm going to take the over in the first 5 innings of the D-backs Angels, and that's going to be my pick. For our final game on today's card, we go to Los Angeles, where the Dodgers are taking on the Texas Rangers. It's Walker Buehler on the mound for the Dodgers, and it's John Gray on the mound for the Rangers. Gray, what we've seen of him, he's been out for a little bit, but what we saw from him earlier, he was having the best season of his career. Certainly, just mowing people down, sub-3 ERA, and we know that Gray pitched a lot of his career in Colorado, so his numbers are always tough to figure out, but we always know that he's a first half of the season type pitcher. Walker Buehler has not been the same pitcher that he was, not even remotely close, before he was injured. The Dodgers have to believe that he can work back into form, or they believe that, maybe they owe something to Buehler, but at the same time, I think he is a serviceable major league pitcher at this point, but just not a top of the rotation guy. Of course, the Dodgers put 15 runs on the board in Tuesday's contest to just 2 for the Rangers. I think the Rangers come out swinging in this one, out for revenge. I like Gray way better than Buehler. I'll take the Rangers in the first 5, and that's going to be my pick for this game. That wraps up today's first halves and first 5 innings. Of course, a loaded card. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow and every single day covering the first halves and first 5 innings. Of course, if you're looking for my best bets, the games I'm betting today, as well as best bets from the world's best handicappers, we have those for you over at our website, PickDawgz.com. Just click on the Premium Picks tab. I also have a link in the description where you can get those as well. Use the discount code PICK. You'll get 15% off all of your purchases. We also have cool PickDawgz gear like the stuff that I'm wearing and much, much more. This zip up as well as this hat and, like I said, other PickDawgz gear. And we have bobbleheads on the way, which I'm really excited to see. Those will happen right around the All-Star break. We'll probably start taking pre-orders for those shortly. But anyways, this is Mitch. Thanks again for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow and let's crush the books together.